listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, we have a lot to get to in the NFL, but big night in the association. We're both basketball fans. We're football junkies, but I think we're basketball fans, and we could have a title winner coming up later this evening.
I just don't understand how we didn't have a game on Sunday afternoon. I don't understand it. Like, I don't get, like, who's making this schedule in the NBA? Like, why do we have to have an 8:30 kick on Monday night? Like, why can't we have this Sunday at 7 o'clock on the East Coast, you know? Look, I know nobody's working around my bedtime, but, I mean, it's seriously, Femi, come on now. I mean, give me a break here, right?
They're trying to stagger their schedule to where if they had a Game 7, it'd be on a Sunday and all that stuff.
I get it. If they don't want to end it on a, so take it. I don't mind it if they went Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, but like Monday. I mean, you know, I get Monday Night Football. That was great. All that I wrote about it in the new book. But Jesus Christ, I mean, can't we have a break here? I mean,
it felt a little empty yesterday.
It did, didn't it?
It did.
It felt like weird. I mean, look, I can't know what's going to happen once we get past, you know, the basketball, and then we're fully, you know, we're even going to be out of Buzz Lightyear season too. Think about that, Femi. I mean, by the end of this week, every team goes on vacation, and there goes Buzz Lightyear's. We're done.
Buzz Lightyear season's done. NBA, NHL season's done. I mean, there's baseball that's going on if you're into that. I keep tabs on that just ever so slightly, but man, yeah, it's getting to that season where it's read up on books, catch up on TV shows. I know that you have a lot of books and shows that you're watching, and I guess that's the time to go ahead and do all that activity. Maybe take a vacation too.
What vacation? I mean, you know, it's funny. It's vacation is doing what you love, right? I mean, you know, just do it in warmer weather. I think that's the thing. So, no, my vacation will be when my sons come back with their families and spend some time. So that'll be good. And we'll do some grilling. We'll get you over one day, Femi. We'll once you're, you know, over for one of those tomahawks, you can sit out back and all that.
Man, kudos to you. Bill Berman tweeted it out on Saturday evening. I saw it. It came across my timeline. I'm like, look at Lombardi on the grill. Got the charcoal going. 3 tomahawks on the grill. Man, you guys were eating good Saturday evening.
Well, yeah, we don't miss a meal. That's why we're so fat. Yeah, you know, and then whatever Millie makes is unbelievable. So, we're doing good. It's all good. Life is good. I cannot complain. I pinch myself every day. I'm thankful to the people that listen to this pod, that watch our shows,
100%.
And to enjoy the life that we have. You know, and you get the chance to talk about football all the time, the sport you love, and talk about leadership. Matt Selman, I thought, was great last week. Got great feedback on him. I'm definitely going out to that writing room and sit there and watch him create The Simpsons and do all those things. So it's a powerful time. Hopefully they'll get that writer's strike handled. So,
you know, the quote that you just said there, but vacation is doing what you love. I so like just that resonates with me because I feel like I've been working my whole life to like get to a point where I want to do something that I love. I love football. I want to talk about football for a living. And now that I do that, like my fiance, and I love her to death, obviously, but she's like, oh, we got to take a vacation. We got to do this. We should go here. I'm like, dude, I love my routine. I love my job.
Yeah.
Like I don't, when I go on vacation, I miss doing this. And maybe that makes me a crazy person, but it's like, this is a lot of fun, man. So, I mean, summer, I'm going to take a vacation coming up in July. Spoiler alert. I'm going to have to go for a week. Otherwise I might get killed. So I will be gone for a week, but I'm like, man, this is a lot of fun, you know?
You know, it's funny because when you work for Al Davis, he used to say to you all the time, oh, fuck, kids, you know, you can't work in the NFL. You've got to live in the NFL. You just can't come in and out like you please. This is a lifetime. And I think anytime you achieve, you know, it's not that you can achieve what you want to achieve when you focus your full attention on the subject matter at hand. And, you know, we wrote about this for the Daily Coach today about being able to understand you've got to get great before you become famous, you know. And I think oftentimes what happens in our lives is people just become famous for doing something stupid. A guy wins the $1 billion ticket in California, now he's famous, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't do anything. He just got lucky, you know. And so to me, I think that search of greatness, or as Tom Peters wrote about, in search of excellence, I think that's really what fuels you. I mean, it certainly fuels Robert Caro and Robert Gottlieb in the documentary Turn Every Page. Those guys are they're fighting against time with their livelihood, and yet they don't cut a corner. To me, that's powerful, and it's the same thing. I think if you have that, like young coaches, every young coach in America is trying to get to another level as opposed to just getting great at what they do, and that other level will come when you get great.
No, I think that's really great advice there. I know there's coaches that listen to the podcast. We see you guys. We know you're out there subscribing and rating and all that stuff and reviewing. But I think that's a great lesson for just not people who are just in the football world, but just in any walk of life, whatever industry that you might be in. Hey, you got to love what you do, and you can't become famous until you are actually great, or at least legitimately famous. So, I mean, there's other ways around it, but we don't need to get into all of that. Let's talk about some people who are great, and let's talk about the running back market as it pertains to New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley. This weekend, he was out in your old neck of the woods there, Jersey City, New Jersey, with the Saquon Barkley Youth Football Camp. And the media, for the first time, got a chance to speak with Saquon Barkley since he hasn't been at Giants OTAs. And Barkley confirmed with the media that he will be missing the Giants' mandatory minicamp. He has not yet signed the franchise tag tender, so there will be no fines for Saquon Barkley. But this is something that's starting to pick up steam as we're kind of about 5-6 away from training camp here.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, Femi, this is when you franchise a player. Pollard signed his as a thing. I mean, look, Saquon's a really good player, and I think he's improved his game. When he first came in the league, he couldn't pass protect worth a darn, and that really affected him because when he was on the field, everybody knew it was run. And I think he's improved his ability. I mean, he had 57 catches last year. He had 91 as a rookie. But a lot of that was he was getting the ball. Everybody knew he was getting the ball. His protection, once people figured out he couldn't really pass protect, they attacked him. But this is a market. I mean, this is not a reflection of Barkley. And I've said many times, I think you have to pay a weapon. But to me, this is supply and demand. This is just basic economics, right? And you've got all these running backs in the marketplace that are not getting paid, and yet they're really good players. But how much of a difference is Dalvin Cook to Madison? There's a difference, but I think what Minnesota was saying, there's not that much of a difference, and we got Madison on a better contract. I think the Barkley situation and this running back situation really explains the NFL perfectly. The fans, we all look at the player, and teams look at the player in the contract, right? And so it's always just the player for the fans, and it's never the player in the contract. The Giants have spent a really good portion of this offseason trying to get their cap back into order because it's been a disaster, because they've been overpaying for guys and doing things that they shouldn't have done. And and now as they look back on their year, I mean, they're going to get through it next year. I think by this time next year, they'll be in really good cap shape, and they'll be able to figure out what they want to do with their team. So, to me, they can't make a mistake here, and they can't do another bad contract like they've done, because when you go through all the variables, they should have about $34 million of cap room. Now, that doesn't count Barkley's contract in it next year, which will give them an opportunity to improve their football team.
Well, let's get into the financials of this thing here, because Saquon Barkley has talked about, hey, I want the new deal, but in his own words, when he spoke with the media, here's what he had to say about the deal that he's looking for and why this is the situation that is with the New York Giants and the contract impasse that they have with their all-pro running back.
But what I will say about the running back market and the value of it, what do you think is going to happen? They tagged the top 3 guys. We didn't even get a chance to hit the open market. So when we don't get a chance to hit the open market, it hurts a guy like Miles. It hurts all those other guys. They put the cap at 10. And then when they have the tag, they have all the leverage. And that's the reality of it. But there's a personal side of it too. When you talk about the New York Giants, I think even Pierce came on and said it. I have a lot of respect in this league, and I think that's how it should be viewed.
The word that kept coming up when he was talking with the media, and that's just a condensed version, the clip is about 2.5 minutes or so, but he kept saying respect. And that's something that you've talked about with money. It's like, hey, why don't some guys take less? Because they feel like there's not that respect in the locker room when they're supposed to be the guy and they're taking less money here. I thought Saquon was pretty open and honest about what the situation was, and it seems like he's kind of just like, hey, we'll figure it out when we get there.
Well, I think, look, respect comes from the marketplace. One thing about the National Football League, it is a system of economics, right? So whatever the reason that people are so interested in tagging running backs or tight ends, for example, is because those numbers haven't gotten extended to a ridiculous amount. If the tag cost you $20 million on a running back, do you think they would have tagged Barkley? No. If the tag would have been $15 million for a tight end, do you think they would have tagged Evan Ingram? No. But the tag is lower. Now, the tag isn't something that the owners just put in place. The tag is a reflection of the other contracts that are done. Mm-hmm. And so, when you sit there and you see that Nick Chubb averages, what he averaged, $12.5 million per year, that goes into the number. McCaffrey's contract, that goes into the number, and that's where they come up with this. And for financially, if the Giants want to keep Barkley, they tag him because it helps them. If they extend him and pay him $16 million a year, they're paying more than they have to. That's economics.
And that's the mistake, you can say, that the Cowboys did with Ezekiel Elliott, paying him that contract when he held out and give him that big deal. Now, 3-4 years later, he's on the open market, not even with the team there. But I do think, I feel for these guys in a sense, and I get what you're saying about the economics of it, but I do feel for the guys at the position because it's not their fault. They happen to play the position that's the most violent position in the league. That is also probably maybe the most replaceable position in the league. When you're talking about skill sets compared to what guys might be making, you're just kind of in a tough spot when you're running back. And like Saquon Barkley says, we don't have a whole lot of leverage.
No, they don't. And look, Miles Sanders made it to the open market. What did Miles Sanders end up making? What did he get? $6.3 million per year on an average.
Wasn't that great?
I mean, he didn't get a big contract. So, I think to me the Giants are showing great respect and loyalty to Barkley by franchising him. I think most people would have just said, "Okay, Saquon, go out there and take us back, give us a chance to match. See what you get in that open market." I think they're showing tremendous respect putting $10 million on him. Same thing with Josh Jacobs. I mean, look, he's a great player. Josh Jacobs, I didn't realize how good he was in the passing game until last year when they started utilizing him. Yeah. That set a different mindset in his ability.
Yeah, like these running backs, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, those are guys that are looking for those extended deals right now. They have been franchise tagged, have not yet signed those tenders. We're going to get into what Josh Jacobs tweeted earlier this weekend as well, because he put out a nice little cryptic tweet. It's cryptic tweet season right now, Michael. I don't know if you know or not, but Josh Jacobs has a tweet. We'll examine that, and we'll talk more about Barkley and the Giants dynamic on the other side, but let's take a quick break here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
The word leverage will be used quite a bit, I'm sure, within the folks who cover the New York Giants, the folks who cover the Las Vegas Raiders when it comes to Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. And Saquon Barkley did not scoff at the idea of perhaps maybe withholding his services and sitting out portions of the season to get what he wants. Now, I don't believe him, at least as we sit here on June 12th. I think he'll end up playing, but that, I guess, is some sort of a play that you could have if you're in that spot. But then it goes back to our old buddy Le'Veon Bell and how that kind of worked out. And that didn't really, we've now since heard he has regrets going ahead and doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, Saquon's too smart, and he already understands he has no leverage. I mean, every time, and here's his bigger issue, right? So if he holds out and he's not, and he comes in late and he gets hurt, and he doesn't have a good season, that doesn't help him in the next year. Nope. So everything is kind of against him, and if he's out of shape, he won't be because he works hard. But, the thing is, if he gets an injury, I think what we don't always equate to is the guys that spent, I think Deebo Samuel mentioned this the other day about how his contract really affected his conditioning, affected his performance last year, which he thought was horrible. I thought it was an honest answer that he gave because he didn't devote the energy and the focus he needed to, and it didn't result in a good year. It's no coincidence that off-season work habits and dedication translates into good season. It also translates into perhaps avoiding injury. Mm-hmm. And I think when you take down this slippery slope, look, I get he doesn't want to come to minicamp. I get he don't want to come to OTAs. I got that. But to me, you're a football player. Football players have to demonstrate they have unique skills. And holding out isn't going to get him anything but lose money. I mean, holding out, once he holds out, he then, believe this or not, Femi, he then does the team a favor. Because every week they pick up cap room.
Oh, no, that's interesting because if you hold out for each one of those weeks, you're talking about in the regular season, correct? Not in like the training camp.
Right.
In the regular season.
So if he holds out, he gets $17 million spread out over 18 weeks. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he misses 4 games. So that's 4 game checks out of the $10 million that get put back into it. Right. So it's not like an injury where if you get an injury, I don't get a refund on your money. And we all know these running backs could get injured at any time. So if he wants to hold out, if I were talking to Saquon's agent and he wants to hold out and he wants to miss time, look, you're doing us a favor. Will we miss him in a game? Oh, absolutely, we're going to miss him. But we're used to missing players. I mean, we have injuries. So if you want to hold out for 7 weeks, no worries. It gives me money back. We're going to keep going because that's what the NFL is. We keep going. We'll find a way to win games. We may not win them as we would easier with you here. We would love to have you, but we'll work around this. And not only will we work around it, we'll pick up cap room. Remember, teams seek player and cap number.
Well, let's talk about how the Giants would be affected by this if he were to hold out. Like, we don't think it's going to happen. That's something that he hasn't ruled out, but that's just one of the talking points and one of the things that might happen due to this contract negotiation. I thought it was interesting what Saquon said. We didn't play it into the clip, but it's out there on Twitter. I think the SNY Giants are the ones that put it out there. But he mentioned how people referenced the stat of the last 6 or 7 Super Bowl teams, the leading rushers had like 800 yards and were late-round draft picks and weren't these high-priced guys. But then his kind of counter to that was, well, 2 of those teams were the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. Like, we don't have Patrick Mahomes on the New York Giants. He wasn't even throwing shade at Daniel Jones. He was just saying, hey, like he's not that caliber of quarterback. So, like, we can't do what the Chiefs do. He got paid like it. That's a whole other deal. We don't need to get into that.
Oh, but Daniel Jones' contract's not going to affect anybody. And here he is saying it, right? Daniel Jones, and here it is Barkley saying it in the most polite way he could say it, right?
He was apologizing for it right after he said it. He was like, I'm not throwing shade at Daniel Jones, but, like, if we're being honest, like, we can't follow the Chiefs model because we don't have that caliber of quarterback. I'm valuable to this team, similar to how Derrick Henry is valuable to the Tennessee Titans. Like, how do you think that would factor into these negotiations to where if you're the Giants, clearly you know that you need him with the quarterback that you have, but you also can't get irresponsible and start paying him like $12 million a year?
I think the thing you have to do is you say, okay, we have Matt Breida behind him. That's not going to be good enough, so we'll sign Kareem Hunt. If he wants to hold out, we'll just sign Kareem Hunt. I mean, one thing you learn in the NFL is life goes on. It goes on. It waits for no one. So we'll sign Kareem Hunt. And we'll sign him on a 1-year deal with a lot of incentives and give him a chance, and he can come in here and be the guy. Well, is he as good as Barkley? No. How much of a decline is it from Barkley? I mean, so say Barkley's a 6'7" player and Hunt's a 63. Okay. I mean, look, we got to win by it with a team. We're not going to win. One player doesn't win a game. One player doesn't win a game. And let's be honest. I mean, the Derrick Henry model's hard to duplicate. It's hard to duplicate.
Yeah, no, definitely it's hard to do. I mean, I'm surprised that Henry's been able to keep chugging along the way he has with the amount of carries he's had in his years. Most of the time,
backs that carry over 300 carries, the next year they're not the same. Yeah. So, they always have a decline. This kid's been uniquely been able to endure. And even though he's gotten hurt at times and he's missed some games, it's just he's still a powerful force. But you have to devote your offense to that. I mean, what Barkley's saying is partly true, but they don't devote their offense to that. I mean, they don't throw the ball down the field. Daniel Jones averaged 6.9 a carry. But they don't come in 3 tight ends and say, okay, we're going to power you back here. They're trying to mix and match and do some different things. Kareem Hunt would fit in good. I mean, if you don't take that attitude, then all of a sudden you're going to cave.
Yeah, that's the desperation attitude that we talked about. Like, hey, you don't want to be paying people when you're desperate because you're like, oh, my God, like, what will we do? There's always an alternative out there, especially with the position where we've seen guys have a lot of success. And I think the issue is that we come to a head that people will say, like, oh, running backs don't have value. Like, I think running backs have value. I think there's just a lot of really good ones. We have a lot of really good ones, and you can kind of sometimes pick up the slack here and there, and at that position, maybe rob Peter to pay Paul. Like, you can kind of do that with running back.
You can't pay everybody. You're going to have to cheat somewhere. You're going to have to kind of cut a corner somewhere. The Falcons decided to not cut they wanted to pay more. They had 2 good running backs on their team, and then they had Cordell Patterson, who they're paying, and then they said, "Oh no, we're going to get one more."
Double down.
I mean, I think that's a little strange to me, but that's what they think. They think that's what's going to win football games.
Yeah, maybe they'll run 3 tight ends, get Kyle Pitts out there inline blocker. We know that'll work out pretty well.
Right, that'll work out well.
Josh Jacobs, though, in Las Vegas, he tweeted, and I talked about how this is cryptic tweet season. This was the tweet from Jacobs. He said, "Sometimes it's not about you. We got to do it for the ones after us." Now, who knows what he's talking about? I'm assuming he's talking about the contract negotiations and everything going on there. Maybe he's quoting a lyric or something from a song that he likes. But this Josh Jacobs situation, what's the latest with the silver and black? And do you think that we're also going to see Josh Jacobs missing minicamp and maybe dragging this thing into training camp as well?
Well, they've already had minicamp, so I think he's missed that already.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
I mean, he's not signed. He's not doesn't sign the tender. So
yeah.
Look, I think to me the philosophy of we do for those who before we have to settle and help those that come after us. I think that's an admirable philosophy, especially in an organization where you believe that culture and history matter and it's a sense of belonging. But it doesn't apply to economics. I mean, your contract, you have to do what's best for you at the right time because that's typically going to be better for the group, right? So Mahomes didn't take all the money. He did what was best for him and his team, right? So, and that may have hurt some of the quarterbacking marketplace, but it didn't hurt him. And I think Jacobs is saying all the right things to his fellow running backs, but it's really not going to help him. He can't control the market because nobody's going to pay this. Again, it goes back to your point. There's too many running backs. Look, I think Jacobs is fabulous, and he went from being a guy that they didn't pick up the 5th year to being one of their best players. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much he changed their mind. But still, it still comes down to don't take this personal, Sonny. This is business. Like this is very, very about there's a large supply. It's $10 million. We've carved it out. Unless we could do a long-term deal. Henry, they did a long-term deal. Henry didn't make all the money on that long-term deal.
Mm-mm. Which of these guys do you think is most likely to get paid first? Is it Barkley or is it Jacobs?
I think it's Pollard.
Whoa, curveball. You think Dallas will do a long-term extension?
It's dynamic. I think if Pollard maybe if he understands it. I mean, I think Jerry's got to be a little gun shy to go pay a running back again.
Yeah.
But Pollard makes them a good team. I mean, he gives them explosiveness. Not that Barkley doesn't and not that Jacobs doesn't because Jacobs is a really good player. But I think when you look at the Raiders, they'll be in even better cap shape next year as they kind of clear out some of these cap issues that they've had too. I think that's the other thing people don't always equate into some of these decisions is how does this impact our cap next year? I think the Giants have really tried under their new regime to do a better job in that area. If they've followed the Philadelphia model is to be able to make sure that we're not going to overpay in areas for replacement guys.
Pollard is an interesting name because looking at his production in his first 4 seasons, he's got a lot of there's not a whole lot of wear on those tires. I mean, his rookie season, 86 carries, second year, 101 carries, third year, 130, last year, 193. That was the biggest workload that he had. So it's not like you're getting a running back who, he has 1,200 carries right now. It's like you have to figure out whether we need to pay him or not. Do you think that Dallas would give him a long-term extension this offseason? I know because he's already signed the tender, but they have until July 17th to work out a long-term deal.
There are 2 numbers with Pollard that make me say what is 8.6 yards per average per catch is second, his 3rd year in the league, and last year he averaged 9.5. That, to me, is why you're going to pay him. Because if he can do that, if he can get that to 9.5, then he's impacting the passing game, which is scoring points. Right? Mm-hmm. That scores points. The guy scored 12 touchdowns last year. Average over. He's the last 2 seasons. He's at 3 of his 4 seasons. He's averaged over 5 yards a carry.
Yeah.
So that to me is now. I think he's got to be realistic. Are they going to pay him what McCaffrey makes? I doubt that.
No.
But I think if they would pay him in the right number, I think he's a valuable guy. He's only 25 years old.
Yeah, he's pretty young still, and he's an explosive runner, that's for sure. And I'm curious to see how he does now with being like the lead guy, because he was always the change of pace guy. Zeke Elliott was the starting running back, but Pollard was the better one at least at last season. But now he's going to be in the lead role. We'll see how he does, but he definitely is an explosive player. Made the Pro Bowl a year ago. He has to rehab that fibula injury, but he says he should be all good to go by training camp. On the other side, I want to talk to you about Dalvin Cook because he has officially been released by the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to try to find a landing spot for Dalvin Cook, and maybe he factors into this thing with the New York Giants and Las Vegas Raiders as well as a potential lingering piece along with Kareem Hunt. This is the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Well, Insider Michael at it again. Earlier this offseason, 2-3 months ago, you talked about this Dalvin Cook situation. The Vikings looking to move on and not saying that Dalvin Cook was available. And then last week, we find out the Minnesota Vikings release Dalvin Cook officially. So the Pro Bowl running back is now on the open market for any team to sign. Minnesota is going to go ahead and move forward with Alexander Mattison. Cook is a player, though, that I know that you like a lot, and you like what he can do in the running game and also in the passing game. What's the market out there for him? And, I mean, after 6 seasons in Minnesota, he was clearly a productive player. But as we've been talking about, Miles Sanders on the open market didn't get a whole lot of money. Barkley is fighting with his team to get some money. Jacobs is fighting with the Raiders to get somebody. It's tough out there for a running back.
It really is, and and this is a kid that has he's been able to fight through injuries. I mean, he plays 17 games last year after most of the time he had not been able to finish the season, and so when he was humming good 3 years ago, he was at 9.8 per catch. He had 63 targets, 53 catches, 9.8. That's kind of what you want, and then he got paid, and then last year he was down to 7.6. And Barkley's was I think 6.4 last year. I mean, to me, that's the number you should focus more on than any other number. His average per attempt, was 4.4. So there is, you see this. I mean, if you're Minnesota, you're saying, okay, he's 27 years old, soon to be 28. He averaged 5 yards a carry 3 years ago. He's down to 4.7, down to 4.4. So and then he's averaged his catching is 7.6. So his numbers haven't really been as good. Now, some could argue, and I think that's fair, that their offensive line in Minnesota hasn't been very good. They've been rather soft, if you will. They haven't been able to get control of the line of scrimmage, and I think Cook's really still a good weapon. But again, it comes down to how much. I mean, everybody thinks he's going to go to Miami, but Miami finished 31st in the league last year in rushing attempts. If you're Dalvin Cook, do you want to go somewhere where the ball's never coming to you?
Maybe keep him fresh. I mean, use him in the passing game, but they didn't run the ball at all.
I mean, so what people don't understand is when a player has to take a pay cut, part of the gift to give back to him to make him feel better is to give him incentives to try to get his number back. And you got to because it's hard to. Because these guys have production, it's hard to create incentives that won't count as likely to be earned. So you come up with a creative way. So you can't say, if he gains X amount of yards, he gained 1173 last year on 264 carries. You've got to find a way to tie his yards gained to a divisional round or something else, something that he did to something that the team didn't achieve. Okay, and then it won't count as likely. And that's a hard thing to do if you're Miami. It's a hard thing to do because, he's got these great numbers last year, and that's going to be a challenge. And Miami's situation is, Miami's of the belief they went all in. I think what people don't realize is how Miami has gone all in this season in terms of, not only trading for Jalen Ramsey, signing David Long, improving their team, but paying a lot of money to get Vic Fangio and winning the Vic Fangio sweepstakes.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked about them last week. I like them as what they've done this offseason. They've definitely been improving their roster here. But I'm curious because I'm at our show sponsor, DraftKings. You can bet on which team Dalvin Cook will sign with. And the favorite is Miami because that's he's from there. He's been linked to them, plus 125. After them, there was the Denver Broncos at 5-1, and then the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills at 9-1, Dallas 10-1, Chicago 13-1. Does that kind of make sense for the order?
I don't know. I mean, look, let's take Miami. Miami right now, currently, where they are, if they go into next year, they're over $50 million over the cap already, and they've got some really difficult guys they've got to sign. They've got Christian Wilkins, who's a good player. They've got, this kid Zach Seiler, who they got from Baltimore, who's a real 2 defensive linemen that are going to be a huge part of their defense this year that they got to sign. And then they still have the looming Tua contract that if he stays healthy, they're going to have to extend him. They're already $54 million over. So if they do something this year that voids out like Baltimore did, they're just putting more damage into their cap for next year. Now, if they want to go all in and say, look, we'll see Super Bowl or bust for us, got that, then they're going to live that life like the Rams are going to have to live and the Bucs are living, and a little bit to an extent that the Vikings are living. So, I think that's the hard one. Those teams that you mentioned, I think the best team for them is Washington. I don't care what anybody. Washington doesn't have a great nickel runner receiver. When they had J.D. McKissick, they were really good. Remember, McKissick signs with Seattle, I think, and then Washington talked him back out of it, and they brought him back, and then he got hurt.
It was Buffalo, I believe. Yeah, it was Buffalo that
was
got
it Buffalo?
Yeah, Buffalo.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, he was originally in Seattle. So, they need this player, and Gibson's good. Robinson's good, but they're not a level above him. But because of their cap situation and their, they signed Daron Payne, and they basically took all his signing bonus and deferred it to September so that the new owner has to pay it, not Snyder. So that's where I think they get. But to me, that place makes the most sense.
They're 55-1 at DraftKings to be Dalvin Cook's next team, and
I don't think they'll do it because they're in limbo. Unless Josh Harris gets control of the team in the next week or so, and he decides he's going to spend some money.
Yeah, and that's something I know Jim Irsay said that it's probably going to be a month or two before the thing finally goes through and Josh Harris is officially the owner of the Washington Commanders. So it seems like we're still a little bit of ways away from the Harris era taking over after the Snyder era for 20-plus years. Let's switch positions, though. We've been talking a lot about running backs on this podcast. I do think it's really fascinating. That's why we spent a lot of time on it. I want to talk to you about DeAndre Hopkins, though, because DeAndre Hopkins, the former All-Pro wide receiver, still on the open market. It's been a couple of weeks now. He took his visit to the Tennessee Titans. At least he arrived in Tennessee on Sunday. I think the visit's going to be coming up later on today. But he also has one scheduled with the New England Patriots. And something that we've discussed on this podcast is the dynamic of Hopkins and now offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien. He's not quite the head coach like he was in Houston, but when he was the head coach in Houston, he traded Hopkins away to Arizona for David Johnson, and I believe a second-round draft pick was the compensation. Do you think that they could make it work? Could they patch up whatever animosity might be existing between those two guys?
No, I think, look, the NFL is always about patching it up. Every line's drawn in sand. You're going to have to, because you're going to have to work with somebody that, it's just part of the world. And with Belichick as the head coach, he's going to handle that and separate, and kind of work through that. Do I think it fits for them? I'm a little bit dubious of it because, they will have most cap room of any team next year. So whatever they do with Hopkins this year, it's going to really affect them next year because Hopkins is probably going to do a voidable contract that dumps money into next year's cap. And then my question is, even as great as Hopkins is, especially even though he's covered all the time, he makes all these plays, what will he settle for? What will his contract be? Where is he going to be able to do it? Remember, when Beckham signed, that was he was willing to take a pay cut at Arizona, but then the Beckham deal came in, and he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Now, the one thing I do know, Femi, is when players start to take visits, they don't have a market. You don't have to get on an airplane if you got a market. You can just sit at home and just answer the phone. You don't have to worry about going to see people or talking to people, all that. You could talk on the phone, Zoom call, whatever, but you don't have to get on an airplane if you got a big market. This is going to be the interesting one. What is the market for him?
So I guess with him taking this visit, is this him kind of coming to terms with the fact that he's not going to get Odell Beckham money?
I don't think anybody. I mean, he hired Clutch Sports.
Yeah. I
don't think they're willing to say. I think they're trying to drive up that business, but now Buffalo got back in, so that tells you something there, right? So there's always news within the news. So Buffalo was out. They signed Leonard Floyd to play end, which I thought was a good signing for them. They need another rusher to go along on the opposite side of Von Miller. So they signed him. And they were kind of like they were soft playing the Hopkins thing. Now they're back in as more serious, which tells me the price has come way down.
Yeah, no, that's a good sign that the price coming way down. But also with the price coming down, doesn't that bring more teams then into the picture? You mentioned Buffalo's back in. Does that bring in maybe Kansas City?
Could bring Kansas City back in. I mean, remember, now the Patriots signed Smith-Schuster. Kansas City wanted Smith-Schuster back. They just couldn't pay him as much as New England paid him. So does that mean Kansas City's back in it? And then, even though he's visiting teams, there's teams out there that he may not visit that are still in it, because at the end of the day, it always comes down to money.
Yeah. Cleveland Browns, they were the favorite to get him a week ago. Now they're plus 350. The favorite is the Buffalo Bills, plus 250. Detroit's plus 350 as well. Have you heard anything about Hopkins in Detroit being a match? Because the betting market seems to think that they have as good a chance as anyone outside of the Buffalo Bills to land him.
Well, I think, and we'll get to this next, is Jamison Williams being suspended for what, gambling? Did he get suspended, right?
Yeah, 6-game suspension.
I mean, I think that they lost DJ Chark, so, they've got good players. I mean, this is a year where Detroit, it's in front of them, so I could see them making that move.
Yeah, but restore the roar, man. It's a big year for the Detroit Lions. They're the favorites to win the NFC North. Everybody's excited about them, and then we'll see them opening night against the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe Hopkins is on one of those teams, or maybe he's on the Buffalo Bills. We should find out later on soon. Do you think this gets done before training camp now, or like when people go on vacation? Okay,
I think it'll get done the next week. I think by the next week it'll get done, unless there's no market. If the market doesn't change, I don't think Clutch is going to just take a bad deal. I think Clutch was going to have to get the number that they want or settle on that. I don't think they're going to there's no sense in taking a bad deal in June. You take bad deals in July when you got to go to work, or August.
Yeah, well, clock is ticking. That's for sure. You hinted at it, the gambling suspensions that we've seen, and I wanted to discuss this before we got out of here and wrapped up for Monday. Obviously, the news has been out there for about a week or so. The Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers is being investigated for, quote, pervasive NFL betting. He owned up to it. He said, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to harm the team or harm the NFL and all that stuff. But the bigger story of this is that there's reports that there are more players who are being investigated by the league. Like, this is something that's become a thing since that gambling is now legal in, like 37, 38 states or so in our country.
Yeah.
Man, like this, do you think this is just going to continue to get worse here before it gets better, or is the message being sent?
I think this is an awareness issue. I think this is an awareness issue. And when it's an awareness issue, you can correct it fairly quickly because you have to drive it home. Now, you've got to make players, and I think, to me, at some point, teams are going to say to players, look, put your phones here when you walk in this building, because we're not going to have it. Or we're going to check your phones for gambling acts. I mean, we got to be able to do that because this is going to impact your career. And who could say wrong with that? You could download the gambling app when you leave the building, but you can't have it on when you're in the building.
Mm-hmm. And especially, they don't want you gambling on the NFL. Like, that's the biggest thing, I think, as well. Because, like, that's that's when you get the year suspension.
That's common sense.
Yeah.
That's common sense, right? That's what they have to do.
You would think it's
but
common
sense.
sense.
Well, sometimes common sense isn't common. That's why you have to reinforce it. You have to make it aware every single day.
Yeah. No, I just think, and obviously, like, we work for a gambling network and all that stuff. Like, so we're not I'm not trying to shun players, but the rules are the rules. The NFL says they
That's
don't want
all they have to follow.
They don't want you gambling on the NFL.
Brady said that when he gave the talk to the rookies. Look, you got to be stupid. This is your livelihood. This is your career. Yeah. Don't risk it on a bet. And the betting companies don't want you doing it either. Follow the rules and the protocol. I mean, how many times do you read where we do a promotion for that, and there's always the line of make sure you bet within your means and be smart about it. It's important. And this is your livelihood,
And because I know, like, a lot of people out there, they'll kind of make the false equivalency of, well, the NFL is in bed with the betting companies. They're sponsored by DraftKings. They're sponsored by this other company over here. It's like, that's a totally separate thing. They just put out the rules of they don't want their players betting on sports. Yeah, they're going to take money from the betting companies because obviously we know betting is a big part of popularity and it drives up the ratings and it drives up just the overall revenue for the league. But that doesn't mean that they want the people in the league betting on it. And also, you can bet on any other sport. If you want to bet on the NBA, knock yourself out. Just do it at home.
Right. But let's be mature about this.
Yeah.
Betting's been going on in England for a long time. They don't have this problem. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't read anything about an English soccer player or a football player betting on his team or betting against a team or whatever because they're aware of it. It's part of who they are. They've been aware of it. So we can get there. We just have to do a better job of keeping people aware of it. I mean, betting's been going on in Europe for years, longer. And people have it in their seats and do all that. so the access is 24/7. But their awareness is much more heightened than ours, and we've got to do a better job. And I think it's got to start in college too, because this is how are they monitoring it in college? I think that's the key.
Yeah, and there's been reports in college. I know, like the Iowa athletic department, there was stuff about them, some suspicious betting activity. There's been college baseball teams, the Alabama baseball team. There was a controversy about one of the coaches as well that got fired. Like I think this is the awareness, and why this is a good thing that we have legalized betting is that we can at least catch this stuff early. If it wasn't legal, we wouldn't be able to catch this stuff early. It could go on for years without us knowing because it was all in the shadows. Now everything's kind of come to light, and we're hypersensitive to it. And now we're seeing the proper repercussions are being held or dealt out there now. So we'll continue to track this story. I'm sure there'll be more guys that end up coming out this, but hopefully guys are starting to get the picture and start to listen about, hey, man, you can't be doing this stuff. Like the league says no, so you just got to stop it. And it's not worth your livelihood. It's not worth your paycheck.
As the great Dr. Phil said, don't do it. Don't do it.
The great Dr. Phil. I haven't seen that show. Is it still on the air? I don't even know if it is.
It's off. It's gone. Yeah, it's gone.
All right. I didn't know that was part of your afternoon
Not
routine.
that I watched it, but that was his thing. Don't do it.
All right.
That's his advice. That's his words of wisdom, and he made a fortune on don't do it. Okay, I got it, Dr. Phil. We won't do it.
Yeah. That's all I had to say. That could be a multimillionaire. He might be a billionaire. Who knows? That does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman. Thank you to DraftKings. Thank you to VSiN. We will talk to you guys on Thursday. Thank you to you, Michael, and I will see you then.